Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. It's February 26, 1959. You're standing on this incredibly desolate, windswept mountainside, northern Urals, Soviet Union.
Yeah, and it is cold. We're talking minus 30 degrees Celsius, maybe even colder. Just brutal.
The place is called 𝐃𝐂𝐃𝐂𝐃𝐂. The local Mansi people, they call it Dead Mountain. And there's this student search party.
Right, they're struggling through the snow, freezing, and they stumble onto something that just doesn't add up.
A tent, half collapsed, buried in snow.
But here's the thing, the immediate thing that makes your hair stand on end. The tent wasn't just, collapsed by weather. It was deliberately cut open.
Cut open multiple times with a knife from the inside.
Exactly, from the inside. That's the first huge paradox. Why would you destroy your only shelter from the inside?
Okay, so let's paint the picture inside that tent. Because it's weirdly orderly. Booths lined up, coats stacked.
Yeah, supplies ready to go. There's even sliced food out, like salo, bacon fat.
Yeah.
As if they were literally just about to eat dinner. It looks lived in, functional.
But completely empty. 9 people, gone.
And then outside, the snow tells us, well, this impossible story. 9 sets of footprints, clear as day, leading away from the tent.
Leading down the slope, towards the trees way off in the distance, like a mile away.
And the state of those footprints? Well, the people who made them were barely dressed. Some in socks, maybe one boot, some completely barefoot.
Barefoot. In minus 30. It's unthinkable.
They walked. Didn't run, apparently. The track suggests they walked sort of calmly, in single file, heading into that lethal cold.
Right. So that's the core mystery, isn't it? What could possibly make 9 experienced hikers slash their way out of a tent, leave everything behind, and just walk into a blizzard to die?
That's what we're digging into today. The evidence, the bodies, the weird clues. What was this unknown, compelling natural force the Soviets officially blamed?
That phrase itself, unknown, compelling natural force, it just screams we have no idea, doesn't it?
Or maybe we don't want you to know. It's a perfect puzzle box.
Okay, so before we get lost in the theories and the weirdness on the mountain, we really need to understand who these people were. Because this wasn't, a bunch of novices.
Not at all. These were highly skilled hikers.
Yeah.
Students, recent graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, the UPI, big deal university.
And they were bonded by this whole Soviet tourism thing, right? This push to explore, to conquer nature.
Exactly. This trip, it was serious business. A 300-kilometer trek in the subarctic. They were aiming for grade 3 certification.
Which was the highest honor you could get as a hiker, basically, unless you were a pro mountaineer.
Right. So they were trained, they were fit, they knew the risks, or they thought they did.
Let's talk about the leader. Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, radio engineering student.
Yeah, Dyatlov. He planned the whole thing, had loads of experience, like 9 major treks already done, described as really knowledgeable, meticulous.
But maybe. Not always easy. I read Zina Kolmogorov's diary mentioned he could be kind of tough, authoritarian even.
Seems that way. Maybe a bit rigid. That meticulous nature, that focus on the plan. It might have played a role later on, when they had to make that crucial decision about where to camp. Efficiency over maybe absolute caution.
And Zina Kolmogorova, you mentioned her diary, she sounds like the opposite, almost. The heart of the group.
Totally. They called her the engine of the hiking club. Incredibly tough woman. There's that famous story about her getting bitten by a viper on another trip.
Oh, yeah? What happened?
She just refused help, wouldn't let anyone carry her pack, didn't want to slow them down, just pure grit.
Wow. But her diary also shows this other side, right? More personal stuff?
Yeah, definitely. There was this whole dynamic with her ex-boyfriend, Yuri Doroshenko, who was also on the trip. She wrote something like, "We are together, and yet we're not together." Adds this layer of, real human complexity. They weren't just hikers. They were young people with relationships and feelings.
And Doroshenko himself, he sounds like quite the character. Fearless.
Impulsive, yeah. Apparently he once charged a bear with just a geologist's hammer. That's the kind of guy he was. That's supposedly how he impressed Zina in the first place.
Huh. The irony is pretty thick there, isn't it? All that bravery.
Didn't help him in the end. Then there was Ludmila Bubinina, Luda. She was the treasurer, the Zahoz.
Another tough one, right? Didn't she get accidentally shot on a hunting trip once?
Yeah. And just calmly skied, like 50 miles to get it treated. These people were seriously resilient.
Okay, but there are 2 other people we absolutely have to mention because their backgrounds fuel so many theories. First, Yuri Krivoshenko.
Right, Krivoshenko. The Joker played the mandolin. But professionally, this is key.
Yeah.
He worked at the Mayak nuclear facility, secret city stuff.
The place with the 𝐾𝐄𝐄𝐏 disaster, the huge nuclear accident.
That's the one. He was involved in the cleanup. That detail becomes very relevant later when we talk about radiation.
Okay, bookmark that. And the other person.
Semyon Zolotaryov, or Sasha as he liked to be called, he's the real outlier. Well, he was older, 38, a WWII vet, loads of hiking experience, maybe more than Dyatlov even. But he joined the group last minute, didn't really know the others.
A bit of a mystery man.
Totally. His background, his presence, it definitely feeds into some of the more, let's say, conspiratorial thinking early on. Was he just there to hike? Or something else?
So, bottom line, a super experienced, tightly knit, mostly, group of resilient, capable people.
Mm-hmm.
The last group you'd expect to find themselves in this kind of inexplicable situation.
Exactly. Which just makes what happened next even more baffling.
So the trip starts off pretty normally, right? High spirits, camaraderie.
Oh, yeah. The diaries paint a great picture, singing songs on the train, joking around. That story about 𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐄𝐏 getting briefly detained by the cops.
We're singing too loud at the station?
Yeah, something like that. Just typical student antics, you know. They even had this emotional goodbye with some local school kids who wanted Xena to stay.
Makes it all the more poignant, thinking about what was coming. But the group didn't stay as 10 for long, did it?
No. January 28th, they reached this abandoned geological outpost called Second Northern, and Yuri Yudin, he has to make a really tough call.
The geology student, what was wrong?
He had chronic pain, rheumatism, maybe a heart condition too. His leg and joints were just giving him too much trouble. He couldn't go on.
Wow. So he had to turn back, watch his friends head off into the wilderness.
Yeah. He became the sole survivor simply because his body wouldn't let him continue. The weight of that. He carried it forever.
He said later, didn't he, that if he could ask God one question.
It would be, what really happened to my friends that night? Haunting.
So the 9 press on. They're making good time, getting close to the highlands, aiming for Mount Otorten.
Right, up until January 31st, things seem okay. Then February 1st hits, and the weather just turns vicious.
Blizzard conditions.
White out.
Pretty much. Visibility drops to near zero. And crucially, they get lost. They veer off course.
Instead of heading for the sheltered pass they intended, they end up climbing the side of 𝐃𝐿𝐴𝐶𝐿. Exactly, this exposed eastern slope. And as night starts to fall, Dyatlov, the leader, faces that classic mountaineering choice.
Go back down to the forest for shelter. Or push on and camp where they are.
Right. Retreating means losing all that hard-won altitude, messing up their schedule. The forest is safer, maybe a mile back down. But Dyatlov...
He chooses efficiency. Pragmatism.
Yeah.
Camp on the exposed slope. Keep the altitude.
It was a calculated risk, standard practice in some ways, but given the conditions, given the location, it was the critical error.
And they did something specific when setting up the tent too, right? Something that weakened the snow?
Yes, absolutely crucial detail. To make a flat spot for the tent, they dug into the snowpack, cut away the top layers.
Standard procedure, you might think.
It is. But on that specific slope, in those specific conditions, cutting into that snowpack basically destabilized the layer just above them. They essentially dug their own. Well, they set the stage for disaster without knowing it.
And yet, that last diary entry from the tent, it sounds almost cozy.
It does, bizarrely. Something like, hard to imagine such comfort on the ridge with the wind howling. They felt secure. They thought they'd beaten the worst of it for the night.
Just hours before,
yeah,
everything went terribly wrong.
So fast forward 26 days, the search party finds the tent. And right away, things are confusing. It doesn't look like a massive avalanche hit it.
How could they tell?
Well, there were skis standing upright nearby, an ice axe too. A big avalanche would have just swept everything away, buried it deep in debris. This tent was partly collapsed, yeah, but mostly filled with wind-blown snow, not chunks of ice and rock.
But the tent was damaged. Violent.
Oh, absolutely. Those cuts, multiple slashes, rips, clearly made with a knife.
And the key finding, made from the inside.
From the inside, which means they weren't trying to get in. They were desperately trying to get out. Like right now, no time for the zipper, just slash your way out.
Out into that freezing hell and leaving everything behind.
Everything. Boots, coats, backpacks with food, supplies, cameras, diaries, even a flask of alcohol untouched. That screams panic, doesn't it? Utter, immediate, life or death panic.
Okay, so sheer terror makes them cut their way out, abandon everything. You'd expect them to scatter, run wildly,
Like,
right?
that's what you'd think. But then you look at the footprints leading away from the tent. They go on for maybe 500 meters.
Right.
The investigators described them as, well, organized and uneventful descent, like they were walking in single file.
Wait, hold on. How does that work? Blind panic leads you to destroy your shelter. Then you calmly walk away in socks?
That's the million-dollar question. It makes no sense. Panic followed by discipline.
It suggests maybe a two-stage event. Something happens at the tent that causes instant terror, the slash exit.
Right, a trigger.
But then almost immediately after, they regain some composure. Enough to decide, okay, we need to get to the trees, let's go together.
It's the only way to reconcile the evidence. A sudden, overwhelming threat, followed by a tactical, albeit desperate, retreat towards the forest, relying on their training, staying together.
Which, ironically, might have been the worst thing they could do if survival meant scattering or getting back to the tent faster individually?
Possibly. Their greatest strength, their cohesion and discipline, might have tragically worked against them in this unique situation.
So the searchers follow these bizarre organized footprints down the slope, about a mile.
Yeah, down to the tree line, near this big Siberian cedar tree. And the scene there, it tells a story of a desperate last stand.
They found evidence of a fire, didn't they? A small one.
Pitifully small, yeah. Like they barely managed to get it going. And the lower branches on that cedar tree were broken off way up high, like 5 meters.
Suggesting they tried to climb it? Why?
Couple of possibilities. Maybe trying to spot the tent back up the slope, see if it was safe to return. Or maybe they were trying to escape something they perceived on the ground. We just don't know.
And beneath this tree,
Oh,
the first bodies.
Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonischenko. Found right there. And the immediate shock was, well, how they were dressed. Or rather, undressed.
Just their underwear. In that cold.
Pretty much minimal layers, and their hands were all torn up, abraded, sunburns, consistent with trying to climb that rough bark and maybe frantically working that fire.
And that horrific detail about Krivonischenko.
Yeah, the autopsy found he'd bitten off a piece of his own knuckle. It was still in his mouth. Just speaks to the absolute agony of their final moments.
How do the investigators explain the undressing? It seems insane.
Medically, it points strongly to severe hypothermia. There's this phenomenon called paradoxical undressing.
Paradoxical undressing.
Yeah, it's grim, but documented. Right at the end stages of freezing, your blood vessels, which have been constricted, suddenly dilate. Your brain's temperature regulation goes haywire. You feel this sudden, intense rush of heat, even though you're freezing to death.
So you start ripping your clothes off, thinking you're burning up.
Exactly. Tragically makes things worse, obviously. Hastens the end.
Okay, so those first two, Doroshenko and Krivonischenko, likely died of hypothermia near the cedar. What about the others?
The search party then found 3 more bodies scattered on the slope between the cedar tree and the tent.
Suggesting they were trying to get back?
Looks that way. Dyatlov himself was found about 300 meters from the tree. He was on his back, facing towards the tent, clutching a small branch.
Like he's trying to pull himself up? Or signal?
Hard to say. Further up the slope was Rustem Slobodin, face down in the snow. His autopsy found something interesting, though. A skull fracture.
A serious one?
About 17 centimeters long, but apparently non-fatal on its own. Still, significant damage.
And Zina Kolmogorova, the engine.
She made it the furthest back towards the tent, almost 630 meters from the cedar. Just an incredible display of toughness, even in death. She also had a strange injury, noted a large bruise on her side, like she'd been hit with something baton-shaped.
So for these first 5, the official cause of death was hypothermia. They fled, they couldn't have survived, maybe tried to return, and they froze. Seems almost straightforward, if terribly tragic.
Almost. But those injuries on Slobodin and Kolmogorova, they were hints. Hints that freezing wasn't the whole story. The real shock was still buried in the snow.
So the initial investigation finds 5 bodies, rules it hypothermia, case closed.
Not even close. The snow was deep that winter, and it took another 2 months until early May for the final discovery.
May 4th. What happened?
A local Mansi hunter found signs of disturbance near a creek bed in a ravine about 75 meters away from that cedar tree.
Right.
They started probing the snow, and they found them. The remaining 4 hikers, Lyudmila Dubanina, Semyon Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibault-Brignol, and Alexander Kolovtov, buried under 4 meters. That's like 13 feet of hard, compacted snow.
13 feet. Wow. Had they built some kind of shelter?
Looks like it. They dug out a rough snow den, even lined it with some branches they'd cut. This shows they were alive for quite a while. After leaving the tent, they were lucid, working together, trying to survive.
But their deaths, they weren't from freezing, were they?
Absolutely not. This discovery completely changed everything. These 4 had suffered massive, crushing internal injuries.
Crushing injuries? Like what?
Like forces you see in major accidents. And here's the truly bizarre part. These were almost entirely internal injuries. Very little external damage, no significant cuts or bruises on the skin that corresponded to the internal trauma.
Okay, break that down. What kind of internal injuries are we talking about?
𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄. Catastrophic skull fracture, described as a multi-splintered pressure fracture, a piece of bone actually driven into his brain. Instant death, basically.
Jesus. And the others?
Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov. Devastating chest trauma. Dubinina had multiple ribs broken on both sides, massive hemorrhage around the heart. Zolotaryov had similar rib fractures on his right side, what doctors call a flail chest.
Flail chest. Remind us what that is.
It's when a section of your rib cage breaks in multiple places and becomes detached from the rest. So when you try to breathe, that section moves paradoxically, sucks in when you inhale, pushes out when you exhale. Excruciatingly painful, makes breathing almost impossible. It's the kind of injury you get from immense force, like being hit by a car or a huge fall onto a hard surface.
So the medical examiner, Dr. Vozrodeny,
Yeah.
what did he conclude?
He was clear. The force needed was comparable to a car crash. And crucially, he said it could not have been inflicted by another human. The force was too great, and the lack of external wounds ruled out assault with, say, a rock or a weapon. Something crushed them.
Something non-human.
That was the implication. And then there were the other gruesome details reported about missing soft tissues.
Right. Dubinina missing her tongue, eyes, lips. Zolotaryov missing his eyes. That sounds horrific. Like deliberate mutilation.
It sounds horrific, and it absolutely fueled the darker theories for years. But context is key here. These bodies were lying in a running creek bed for 2 months.
So decomposition. Scavengers.
Most likely, yes. Water flow, small animals, bacteria. They can cause that kind of soft tissue damage quite rapidly, especially to exposed areas like the eyes and mouth. While it adds to the horror of the scene, it's probably explainable by natural processes post-mortem rather than, a monster attack.
Okay, that makes sense. But even setting that aside, the scene in the ravine, it also showed resourcefulness, didn't it? They were using clothes from the others.
Yes, absolutely. They had clearly gone back to the bodies near the cedar tree and taken clothing from Doroshenko and Krivonischenko. Zolotaryov was wearing Dubinina's hat and coat. Dubinina had wrapped her foot in a piece of Krivonischenko's trousers.
So they weren't panicked or crazed. They were injured, yes, but thinking clearly, trying to survive, helping each other.
Exactly. Fighting to live right up until whatever crushing force overcame them in that ravine.
Okay, so we have this utterly baffling scene. 5 frozen, 4 crushed by incredible force, tent slashed from the inside, organized footprints. What did the official Soviet investigation say in the end?
They basically threw up their hands. The official conclusion, May 1959, the hikers died due to an unknown compelling natural force.
Which means nothing, really.
Pretty much. And then adding fuel to the fire, they classified the files, shut down access to the area for 3 years.
Instant conspiracy fodder.
Absolutely. And that speculation wasn't just based on the weird evidence. It was fueled by 2 persistent, really strange anomalies that seemed to point towards, well, something else going on, something the government might want to hide.
Anomaly number 1. The lights in the sky.
The orange spheres. Yeah, this is a big one. On the night of the incident, February 1st to 2nd, another hiking group miles away.
Like 30 miles south?
Something like that, yeah. They reported seeing these weird, strange orange spheres moving silently across the sky, generally in the direction of 𝐃𝐂𝐃𝐂. And it wasn't just them. Over the next few weeks, there were other reports from the military, from weather stations, multiple independent sightings.
Okay, weird lights are one thing, but does it connect directly?
Well, this is where it gets juicy. Decades later, Lev Ivanov, the original lead investigator...
The guy who wrote the Unknown Compelling Force report.
That's him. He gave an interview, basically confessed that he'd been ordered by high-ranking party officials back in '59 to drop that whole line of inquiry, to ignore the sphere reports completely.
Ordered to ignore evidence. That smells like a cover-up.
It certainly suggests they knew something about those spheres and didn't want it connected to the hikers' deaths. Ivanov himself said he came to believe the spheres were directly involved.
So what were these spheres, potentially? Military tests? UFOs?
The most grounded explanation connects them to Soviet rocket launches. The R-7 missile program was very active then, testing ICBMs. The boosters falling back to Earth, burning up on re-entry, could absolutely create large, fiery, orange-glowing phenomena in the sky.
Okay, so maybe secret missile debris that the military wouldn't want associated with dead hikers.
Plausible. Terrifying sight, potentially dangerous, definitely secret. Makes sense they'd want to hush it up.
All right, anomaly number 2. This one feels even more sci-fi. Radiation.
Yeah, the radiation findings. Forensic tests on some of the clothing recovered from the ravine victims.
Specifically, Dubinina's sweater, Kolotov's pants.
Right. They showed traces of beta emission radiation. Higher levels than you'd expect on average people who don't work with radioactive materials.
Okay, that sounds like a smoking gun. Nuclear weapon test. Accidental release.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? But again, gotta look closer. Beta radiation is energetic electrons. The levels found were elevated, yes, but not lethally high, not nearly enough to cause the kind of injuries they saw, or radiation sickness.
So if it wasn't a weapon causing it right there, where did it come from?
Well, let's connect the dots back to the hikers themselves. Remember Yuri Krivonischenko?
The guy who worked at Mayak, the secret nuclear city.
And was involved in the Kishtim cleanup. It's entirely possible he carried residual contamination on his clothes into the expedition. Or even Zina Kolmogorova lived in an area potentially affected by Kishtim fallout.
Ah, so they might have brought the radiation with them.
It's a strong possibility. Another source could even be mundane. The thorium used in camping lantern mantles back then was radioactive. So the radiation was real, it was anomalous, but it doesn't necessarily point to a nuclear event on the mountain that night. Could be contamination they carried themselves.
So two major anomalies, spheres and radiation, that seem suspicious but maybe have less dramatic explanations than secret weapons?
Maybe, but combined with the weird deaths and the official secrecy, you can see why the conspiracy theories took hold and never really let go.
Okay, so for 60-plus years, people have been trying to crack this. Give the weird evidence, the secrecy, the anomalies. The theories have gone all over the place.
Everything from Yetis and UFOs to, secret Soviet superweapons.
Let's quickly dismiss the easy ones and attack by the local Mansi people.
No evidence, no foreign footprints. The Mansi helped the search, and the injuries weren't consistent with human assault anyway. Remember Dr. Vozrozdeny?
Right, the car crash force. Yeah. What about an internal fight? Maybe the group turned on each other.
Highly unlikely. The diaries suggest they were getting along okay, typical group dynamics aside. And again, a fist fight doesn't crush multiple rib cages like that. Plus, the organized retreat. It speaks to cooperation, not conflict.
Okay, so setting aside Yetis and murder, let's look at the more persistent, rational theories. The military test theory seems like a strong contender, especially with the spheres and the cover-up angle.
It does seem compelling at first glance. A secret weapon test, maybe a concussion bomb, a parachute mine designed to create pressure waves, could potentially explain the internal injuries without external wounds.
Yeah, the shock wave, or the terrifying sight and sound, would definitely explain the panic, the slash exit.
Exactly. It ticks those boxes. And it fits the Cold War context, the secrecy, Ivanov's later confession.
So what's the problem with it? Why doesn't it fully hold up?
The lack of physical evidence on site is the main thing. No crater, no shrapnel, no weapon fragments, no residue beyond that possibly explainable radiation. If it was a bomb or missile, you'd expect something.
And the injuries themselves?
They're kind of specific and varied. Would a single blast wave crush some people's chests and skulls while leaving others nearby relatively unharmed physically? It seems unlikely. You'd expect more uniform, or at least more widespread, blast effects.
Okay, so the military weapon theory has holes. What about the infrasound theory? This one's more environmental.
Yeah, this one blames the mountain itself, or rather the wind interacting with the mountain. The idea is that strong katabatic winds flowing down Kholat-Syakhl could create something called a Kármán vortex street.
Like wind eddies or whirlpools in the air?
Sort of. And these atmospheric vortices can theoretically generate very low-frequency sound waves, infrasound, below the range of human hearing.
But it still affects you.
Oh, big time. Even though you can't hear it, infrasound can cause really unpleasant physical and psychological effects. Intense nausea, shortness of breath, dizziness, a profound sense of dread or presence, and overwhelming irrational panic.
Okay, that sounds like it could explain the sudden urge to flee the tent, right? That feeling of pure terror from an unseen source.
It explains the panic beautifully. It's an elegant way to account for why they'd slash their way out and run from a perfectly safe shelter without needing a visible threat.
But, and there's always a but with Dyatlov Pass.
It doesn't explain the trauma, not at all. How do you get from infrasound-induced panic to crushed skulls and chests?
You'd have to assume they panicked, ran blindly, and 4 of them just happened to fall into the ravine so hard they sustained car crash injuries.
Exactly. It requires a second, highly unlikely event to explain the physical evidence. So infrasound explains the panic, but not the bodies in the ravine. It's incomplete.
So military tests have problems, infrasound has problems. For years, the idea of an avalanche was also dismissed, wasn't it? Because the scene didn't look right.
Right. No big debris field, tent wasn't totally flattened, skis standing upright. It didn't fit the picture of a classic huge powder avalanche sweeping down the mountain.
But then came a major reassessment, relatively recently. A 2019 Russian investigation pointed towards it, and then that big 2021 Swiss scientific paper.
By 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄 and Puzrin, yeah. That paper was groundbreaking. They used serious computer modeling stuff involving, believe it or not, animation code developed for Disney's Frozen to model snow physics.
Seriously. Frozen.
Yep. Apparently, it's really good at simulating snow deformation, and they combine that with data from old General Motors car crash tests to understand blunt force trauma.
Okay, so high-tech modeling. What do they conclude?
They concluded it was an avalanche, but not the kind people usually picture. It was a specific type, a small, delayed-release slab avalanche.
Slab avalanche. Explain that.
Okay, picture the snowpack in layers. Sometimes you get a weak, unstable layer buried beneath a denser, heavier slab of snow. If that weak layer fails, the whole slab above it can slide down as a cohesive block.
And how does this fit the Dyatlov scene? What was the sequence?
It fits perfectly if you reconstruct the events. Step 1, the trigger. Remember how the hikers cut into the slope to make a flat platform for their tent?
Yeah, they weakened the snowpack right above them.
Exactly. They created a fracture point in that weak layer under the slab. Step 2, the loading. During the night, those strong katabatic winds blew more snow onto the slope, adding weight, slowly increasing the stress on that already weakened slab just above the tent.
So it was like a ticking time bomb they didn't know they'd set?
Pretty much. Step 3, the impact. After several hours, maybe 9 to 13 hours according to the models, the stress became too much. The weak layer failed, and that slab of dense, compacted snow slid down, maybe not very far, but right onto the upper part of the tent where they were sleeping.
A relatively small slab, not a mountain clearing event.
Correct. But heavy, dense, wind-packed snow is surprisingly heavy.
Okay, the crucial question. How does this slab cause those horrific internal injuries without external signs? The car crash force.
This is where the modeling and remembering the details of the camp setup becomes key. What did they put under the tent floor for insulation?
Their skis, hard wooden skis.
Right. So the hikers are lying asleep essentially on a hard, unyielding surface. When that heavy slab hits the tent from above, the force isn't absorbed by soft ground. It's transmitted directly through their bodies against the hard skis.
Ah, like being caught between a hammer and an anvil.
Exactly. The models showed the specific scenario impact from dense snow onto bodies lying on a hard base could absolutely generate the kind of focused, high-pressure, blunt force trauma needed to cause those specific chest and skull injuries without necessarily breaking the skin. It matches the autopsy reports.
Wow, that actually makes chilling sense. The skis, meant for safety and comfort, become part of the mechanism of injury.
Precisely. And that sudden, violent impact, being woken up by that crushing weight, would be terrifying. It explains the immediate panic, the fear of a bigger avalanche coming, hence slashing their way out.
And why no debris field later?
Because the slab was relatively small, it likely stopped at the tent or just beyond. Any lingering snow debris from that specific slab would have been easily scoured away and redistributed by the constant high winds over the 26 days before the search party arrived.
Leaving the scene looking confusingly not like an avalanche to the first rescuers.
Correct. The slab avalanche theory, especially as modeled by 𝐃𝐈𝐕𝐄 and Puzrin, ties together the internal injuries, the panic exit, the lack of debris, the location on the slope, even the delay between setting up camp and the event. It provides a coherent, natural explanation for almost all the key paradoxes. #outro.
So if this slab avalanche theory holds, it really reframes the whole story, doesn't it? It moves away from the supernatural, the conspiracies, the monsters.
And brings it back to a very terrestrial, albeit incredibly tragic, sequence of events. A natural hazard, triggered unintentionally by the hikers themselves, leading to a logical, desperate, but ultimately doomed response.
But knowing the probable how, it doesn't make the human element any less terrifying or heartbreaking.
Not at all. In fact, it maybe highlights their courage even more. You imagine the scene. Sudden impact, injuries, panic. But then, discipline kicks in. They regroup, they retreat together, they try to make fire, they tend to the wounded in the ravine.
They share clothing from those who died first.
Acts of incredible camaraderie in the face of certain death. And Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, Slobodin, trying to make that impossible climb back up the slope towards the tent for supplies.
dying facing the wind, trying to save the others. It becomes a story of immense bravery against impossible odds rather than just inexplicable madness.
Definitely. And the pass, now named Dyatlov Pass, it stands as the silent memorial to that struggle.
The science might give us the most likely explanation now, but that feeling of dread, the sheer human terror of that night, that's never going to completely fade, is it?
No, because it taps into that primal fear of the wilderness, of nature's indifference, of how quickly things can go wrong despite the best preparation.
Which leaves us with, maybe, a final unsettling thought. If the slab avalanche theory is right, the most terrifying aspect isn't a secret weapon or a Yeti. It's the realization that sometimes meticulous planning, experience, even the deep bond of friendship, none of it matters against the simple, brutal physics of the natural world.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, if their greatest strength, their training to stay together, to retreat in an organized way, might have actually sealed their fate by keeping the injured and healthy together, slowing everyone down, then what instinct could you truly rely on when you're facing that unknown, compelling natural force?
And so, another chapter closes. For more journeys into history's forgotten files, please like and subscribe. Your next story awaits.